Hello, everyone. It's just Jeffrey joining you for the latest episode of Historic New Jersey, and today we're bringing you to Paulus Hook in Jersey City.
The significance was that the Americans won the battle. It was a half an hour long battle that occurred really in the early morning of August 19th. But what the real significance is that it helped change the attitude of both the British and the Americans. The Americans had a decisive victory, and the British felt that it was more important to concentrate their efforts elsewhere, and that's when the battles were shifted to the south. So the whole point of the British being here in the first place is that they needed to have control of New York, but more importantly of the Hudson River. And that is because if you control the Hudson River, you can split all the colonies apart, divide and conquer. So you would split the northern colonies from the middle Atlantic and southern colonies, and then take them on one at a time. Warfare in the 18th century is very different than what we know today. What they were beginning to realize, the British, was that the Americans were not going to stop. And because their ammunition was wet, and because it was a bayonet charge, it really showed the determination of the Americans. So you can see why this area is so important. It's directly across from Manhattan. The ferry would have come to Paulus Hook from Water Street in Manhattan. It's an important place for surveillance because all of these flying camps are about surveillance and defense. But more importantly, it's about, for the Americans, it's about harrying the British.
I want to talk about the victory itself, but this was originally, Paulus Hook was a fort?
Well, it was a flying camp. So Washington, in preparation of a British invasion, set up camps up and down both sides of the Hudson River. This was one of them. But when the British did take over New York, these were abandoned and then taken over by the British. And they were actually occupied by the British for the entire Revolutionary period. Now, of course, it's a cityscape, but it was about 150 feet in diameter. There were several redoubts. There were a few blockhouses and barracks. And when Major Henry Lee arrived, he not only found the British, but he found refugees. So that would have been British loyalists living in the fort. And that's what caused it not to be burned in the first place. Lee left Newbridge, which is present-day Paramus, I believe, and he marched to New Durham. And at New Durham, there was an inn called the Three Pigeons, and it was a meeting place for all the locals. If you wanted to have a meeting, or if you wanted to, just meet up with your friends, you would go there. But it was well known to the Patriots, and this was used as a rendezvous spot for Major Lee to meet his guides, to take him through Bergen Woods. Because don't forget, it would have been heavily policed by the British. There would have been British contingents all throughout the neck. So they really wanted to avoid that and not have any skirmishes before the actual battle. He met his guides there, and the plan was to march through Bergen Woods, because this was Bergen Neck, right? And the old Dutch town of Bergen is what is now Journal Square. And they marched through Bergen Woods for 14 miles. But the guides, either inadvertently or purposely, got them a little lost. So what should have been a 6 or 7 hour march turned into a 12-hour march. And they arrived here at 3 o'clock in the morning. When they arrived at Paulus Hook, they then had to march through the marsh, because Paulus Hook was really, for all intents and purposes, an island.
So this was all what we're standing near and seeing was wilderness, essentially.
No, it wasn't.
Swamp.
I mean, there was a ferry here. There was a tavern here prior to the Revolution. It had been the Van Vorst lands and farm, but it really was not built up. And it was surrounded by marshland. So in order to get to the mainland, you would have to traverse the marshes. So the Lees contingent did that, but in doing so, their ammunition got wet. So that when they actually did attack at around 4 o'clock in the morning, it was a bayonet charge as opposed to a munitions charge.
And with bayonets alone?
They took 150 prisoners.
Wow.
They only sustained 2 deaths and 3 injuries. And they did not burn the fort, as I said, because there were women and children and indigent older people living within it, so they let it remain. But they did have to march those 150 prisoners. First, they wanted to go to Dow's Ferry, where they had arranged to have boats to take them over the Hackensack. Those were inadvertently or inexplicably missing. They ended up at Newark. So he had to march back to Newbridge with his now very tired contingent and all of his 150 prisoners. So they didn't arrive until the early morning the next day at Newbridge, but they were successful. And this really helped change the tide of the war. This really changed people's attitude about the war and the ability of the Americans in general.
Once again, I'd like to thank Brian Murray from the Hudson County Office of Cultural and Heritage Affairs. Brian, thank you so much.
Jeffrey, it's always my pleasure.
And we hope to see you again soon as we make our way through the Revolutionary War history of New Jersey.
I look forward to it.